Now entering his second season at the helm, Mike Macdonald was hoping for 2 sets of joint practices, but he'll have to just settle for 1. We're going to be breaking down Seattle's latest training camp road trip coming up next year on our Wednesday edition of Locked On Seahawks.
You are Locked On Seahawks, your daily Seattle Seahawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Greetings, 12. This is Corbin Smith, host of the Locked On Seahawks podcast, your daily Seahawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Glad to be joined, as always, by my co-host in crime, Rob Rang, and a special thanks to each and every one of the 12s listening in, whether you're in Redmond, Washington, or Albuquerque, New Mexico. Thank you, as always, for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. We greatly appreciate it. We are going to continue our OTAs preview with practices beginning next week. We've got a really talented stable of running backs, as well as a mostly the same edge group for the Seahawks on defense. We're going to be diving into both those positional groups with maybe some key competitions to watch, some questions at each position, and much more. Without further ado, let's get to it now for your lead story here on our Wednesday edition of Locked On Seahawks. Earlier this offseason, Mike Macdonald made it clear that he was hoping the Seahawks didn't have just 1, but 2 sets of joint practices against teams that they had scheduled in the preseason. Unfortunately, that goal is not going to come to fruition due to the teams the Seahawks drew for their preseason games. However, they still will get to take their training camp show on the road to Green Bay in mid-August. And Rob, honestly, the timing of this, I'm really intrigued by how late in the process this is going to be, because this really is the best prep that you can get. And I think the Packers are probably approaching it the same way. This is the best prep that you can get during that third preseason game when starters usually don't play anyway. Give them those valuable reps that you can control on the practice field. You control the pacing when the whistle comes in, but you're still getting those really good reps against a talented Packers team. To get them late in training camp like that before you select your 53-man roster and shift your attention to week 1 against the 49ers. I think that this is a perfect scenario. I know Mike Macdonald was hoping that one of those first 2 teams on the preseason schedule would come up to Seattle, but that is not going to happen because we know Pete Carroll with the Raiders. Pete Carroll never did joint practices. He doesn't believe in them, and neither does Andy Reid in Kansas City. So it's got to be Green Bay, but that's a really good football team to get those reps against at the end of training camp.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you, Corbin. I think that, the Las Vegas Raiders would have been a really fun matchup from a fan perspective. Obviously, reuniting with Pete Carroll would have been fascinating. And if Seattle was on the road, then I think that just the different climate of the Las Vegas area. Henderson, Nevada is where I believe the Raiders are actually going to be holding their training camp this season. Just that dry heat would have been good to kind of evaluate the Seahawks had that game been on the road. But of course, it's going to be at Lumen Field. And then the same thing here with the Kansas City Chiefs. If Seattle was traveling to Missouri, then that would have been fascinating as well. Again, just to evaluate the team. But it's going to be another home game. So this is one of those rare situations where it's actually, I think, a little bit of a detriment to the Seahawks that they have 2 preseason games at home and then only the 1 preseason game on the road. That said, obviously there's a great deal of familiarity with the Green Bay Packers. They've been rivals of the Seahawks for an awful long time. John Schneider cut his teeth with the Green Bay Packers. Green Bay does have experience in going or having these joint practices. I actually attended their joint practice with the Denver Broncos a year ago. The Seahawks, of course, had their joint practices with the Tennessee Titans a year ago. I agree with your initial statement there. What a wonderful opportunity this is to evaluate players, to control the setting, as opposed to a game where it's much more difficult to do that exact thing. So I understand why the Raiders don't want to do it. Again, as you mentioned, Pete Carroll has never been a proponent of this. The Kansas City Chiefs, they want to protect Patrick Mahomes. That's one of the reasons why I think that actually they could have made an argument to do this. But again, you're coming to the relatively cool Pacific Northwest. I know the Kansas City Chiefs are going to get as much benefit out of that as the Seahawks might have. And so you understand why Andy Reid and the general manager, Brett Veach, would be like, hey, I'm not so sure that we want to actually do this. But I do love the possibility. I do love the fact that Seattle is going to be having these joint practices against the Green Bay Packers right before the August 23rd game, preseason game, the last of the preseason games. It is a little bit late in the preseason schedule, but at the same time, it is a wonderful opportunity to evaluate all of the players that are going to be right there on the cutting line.
And as I said, that would mean, and we saw it in Tennessee last year, starters are not going to play. They're not going to play in the actual game. Their reps are going to be coming in practice again when the coaching staff for both teams can really control the pace, they can control the tempo, and with that, hopefully avoid injuries happening, but they can still get really good reps against starter caliber players with the Green Bay Packers. And same thing for the Packers with the Seahawks. And so I think Mike Macdonald obviously is excited for that opportunity to get to go against LaFleur and his offense. I think that there's always a chance to really learn some things during that week from a coach's perspective as well. Not that they're going to be showing everything, because both teams are not going to be doing that. But I do think that it provides a chance for not just the players, but the coaches as well. I will admit, I was kind of excited about the possibility of how weird would it have been to see Pete Carroll roaming the VMAC again, but in Raiders clothing. Like, I just think it would have been so crazy, and maybe from his standpoint, really awkward, maybe for the people in the building awkward, but I think it would have been a really fun environment for that to happen. But as we know, Pete Carroll has always kind of had that guarded approach. I want my team practicing against themselves. I don't want other teams out here having any idea how we practice or the way that we do things. He likes to keep things closed off. And Andy Reid has been much the same way in Kansas City. So once I saw that those two teams were the first two teams, I don't think it mattered where the game was at. They just don't do joint practices. So Mike Macdonald wasn't going to get the second opportunity this time around, but you still get that weekend. Like I said, I think having at the end of the training camp like that, what a way to put the cherry on top of your preseason and training camp before going in when the real bullets start flying in early September. Get those reps against a Green Bay team that I expect is going to be one of the best in the NFC, a really competitive, well-coached team. It really gives you an early chance to kind of test your mettle in a practice environment and see where things are at before you face the 49ers on September 7th. So I think the timing of this is excellent. And of course, I'd be remiss linking this joint practice and preseason to a couple of the rules today. In particular, I know our listeners, they want to hear our thoughts on the Tush push and the fact that it didn't get the 24 votes needed to be banned. I am quite frankly relieved. I know there are a lot of people that don't agree with me on this, but if every team in the league was doing this and it was just a cheat code for the entire league, I would get it. But that has not been the case. Philadelphia has just been head and shoulders above everybody else. You don't ban a play. And listen, the injury data is not there. John Schneider was talking about that earlier this year after they had to table the vote at the league meetings, that the votes or that the data was not there to suggest that this was a play that was causing more injuries. That data is not there. So why take away a play from one team because you cannot stop it and the rest of the league isn't near as efficient doing it? Figure out how to stop it instead of saying we're going to ban this because you're too good at it. To me, this would have been a really bad thing for the league if they would have done this. Maybe in a year or two it changes and they vote again on this, but I think that this is a play that I'm happy is not getting removed.
Corbin, it doesn't make for good sports radio, good podcasting for me to agree with you on multiple points, but I absolutely agree with you here. I want the Seahawks to get more physical, meaner, nastier, beat the defending Super Bowl champions at their own game, and that's football. You know, and I think that the Seahawks actually are pretty well suited to do that. We talked recently here about the defensive tackle talent that the Seahawks have. I think that you always can find big-bodied defensive tackles. The Seahawks got, re-signed Jonathan Hankins here recently to be able to kind of be that big body in the middle. I do think that is a position of concern. But not so much do I want to have the conversation about defending the Tush push. I want to think about what Seattle is doing on offense to take advantage of the fact that this rule is going to stay in place in the 2025 season. I don't know, maybe just draft the most athletic quarterback in this class. Like, it's not always about power; it can be about speed as well. And so I think that the Seahawks, with the running back talent that they have, the fact that you have a quarterback that does have strength, does have the speed. This doesn't have to just be a short yardage play. It can be a play on 3rd and 3 where you're hoping that your quarterback is able to squirt away and, I don't know, run for 20 touchdowns the way that Jalen Monroe did for the Alabama Crimson Tide a year ago. I mean, I just think that this is a rule that the Seahawks recognized correctly. It was not going to go away because a bunch of team owners and executives were going to just argue that it shouldn't be enforced. They should be kicked out. I think they recognize this is football now. There are going to be some kind of rugby scrubs. And so, look, give all credit to the Philadelphia Eagles. Jalen Hurts is a uniquely built quarterback who has incredible strength in his lower body. The Philadelphia Eagles are the best in the NFL. They proved this last season with their size, strength at the line of scrimmage. I think that the Seahawks are on the upswing in that area. I think if Mike Macdonald is going to build this team the way that he wants, the Baltimore Ravens way, they have to be better. So why not compete against the best and do it in that way? So I think that I'm excited about the fact that Tush pushes back, not because I'm a Philadelphia Eagles fan, because I do believe that the Seahawks are building themselves up to be a Philadelphia Eagles type of a squad. And by that, I mean a legitimate Super Bowl contender.
And I can't speak to whether John Schneider voted yay or nay on this, but based on the comments that he had less than a month and a half ago, I would be stunned if he's not one of the 10 that voted against banning this. And Mike Macdonald has been adamant that he did not want to see this removed because to me, he's sharing a similar sentiment to us. Like, prove he can stop it. Like, this is football. Play the game and find a way to adjust and adapt to what the other team is doing. And from a Seahawks perspective, I'm putting Jalen Milroe in there and I'm having Robbie Oots behind him doing the pushing. That's what I'm doing. I'm getting that big fella in there pushing Jalen Milroe, and I'm hoping that somebody misses a tackle and then he takes off with that 4.39 speed and he's gone, because that is a different element that Jalen Hurts does not bring to the equation there. He's fast, but he's not that fast. So, look, the Seahawks could very well replicate this. Their offensive line's got to be able to do it. That's the key. The Eagles have been so darn good at that over the last couple of years. But I'm glad that they haven't eliminated this rule and that they've kept it in, because if every team was doing it again, I'd get it. But one team is just better than everybody else at it. The injuries, they're not there. The data is not there that more injuries are happening. So what's the point of getting rid of it just for the sake of trying to make a team that's really good at it weaker? To me, that's not fair, and I'm glad it wasn't voted down. When we come back, we're going to talk some running backs. Seattle's got their top 3 backs from last year returning. They've also got a couple intriguing youngsters, including a draft pick in Damian Martinez entering the fold. We're going to look at where that group stands going into the season coming up next here on our Wednesday edition of Locked On Seahawks. This episode is brought your way by LinkedIn Jobs. As a small business owner, your work doesn't end when the clock hits 5. Your business is always on your mind, which means when it's time to hire, you need a partner that works just as hard as you do. That's where LinkedIn Jobs comes in. When you clock out, LinkedIn clocks in. LinkedIn makes it easy to post your job for free, share it with your network, and get qualified candidates all in one place. LinkedIn's new features can help you write job descriptions, then quickly get your job in front of the right people with deep candidate insights. And here's a pro tip: add the hashtag hiring frame to your profile picture to double your reach to qualified candidates. No wonder 72% of small businesses say LinkedIn helps them find high quality hires. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Welcome back to the Wednesday edition of Locked On Seahawks. I'm your host, Corbin Smith. He's Rob Rang. A special thanks to each and every one of the 12s who are tuning in. And thank you, as always, for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. We greatly appreciate it. Continuing our position by position preview, going into OTAs, We've talked quarterbacks. We looked at defensive tackles. Now we're going to go to arguably the deepest position group on Seattle's offense, and that is the running back group. They've got all three of their top backs from a year ago returning, actually all four, if you include George Halani in there as well. He got a handful of games worth of regular season action for Seattle last year. And then they add Damian Martinez, the Oregon State and Miami running back in the 7th round, averaged 6 yards per carry in his college career. So you add him to this stable. And when, again, you look at this group, Rob, the depth, the talent, the different types of runners that Seattle's got. All of these guys have their own bread and butter, their own formula for success. And you've got a new offense. There's a lot of excitement. For me, it's a cautious optimism with Ken Walker III in this zone scheme. Is he going to read his blocks? Is he going to make the cuts that he needs to? Because if he does, the athleticism there for him to absolutely explode in this offense. Zach Charbonnet has proven that he can run zone and gap stuff, was really good late in the season last year. Kenny McIntosh played well late in the season. And Martinez, not the fastest back, but he ran a 4.51 at 217 pounds, and he's a bulldozer that, oh, by the way, had some of his best runs on zone concepts at Miami and Oregon State. So I just think when you look at this group, the real question to me is, can this group just play to their talent level? And not all of that has been the fault of the running backs. The offensive line has certainly not helped from that standpoint. And yet there's been injuries, there's been inconsistencies, there's been frustration with wanting to bounce runs too much outside. If you're looking at Ken Walker specifically, can this group, especially with Damian Martinez now in the fold, can they play to their talent level? Because I think in terms of talent level, this is a top 3 running back group in the NFL going into the season.
Yeah, it certainly is a very gifted running back group. And I do think that Seattle's offensive line has got to improve for the running back group to, really blossom the way that their talent suggests that they could. I just do believe that Seattle's offensive line is going to improve. I think that is just, I think the talent is better. I think the coaching is better, and I think that the running back spot, as you noted, that it is just so much deeper than it probably has ever been. I mean, I think that you could make an argument that this is the deepest, most gifted running back group that the Seahawks have ever had. And that's, crazy talk when you consider some of the backs that Seattle has had, some of the depth that they have had. But, again, obviously, when you're talking about just the electric ability, then that's Kenneth Walker III. I mean, my goodness, whether he is a terrific fit in his own blocking system, it remains to be seen. But in conversations that I've had with some of the people inside the building, Kenneth Walker III is in the best shape of his life. He looks it. There's been pictures that have been circulated on social media that show just how cut he is. And I think that it makes a lot of sense considering the fact that he is entering the final year of his rookie contract. We know the players often are motivated by that. And I think that he offers a home run hitting ability that is very similar to the aforementioned Philadelphia Eagles and what they have with Saquon Barkley. Now, I'm not going to argue that Kenneth Walker III is going to be an MVP candidate the way that Barkley was and rushed for 2,000 yards. But at the same time, I do believe that he has the ability to take it 90-plus yards on any snap. And that just makes the Seahawks that much more dangerous. And then no question about that, Zach Charbonnet has already proven that he could be very successful in his own blocking system. Kenny McIntosh has done the same thing. They have very good vision. They have that ability to cut back against the grain. And I love the fact that you mentioned Damian Martinez and how successful that he was in some of the zone blocking concepts. I remember watching the bowl game, the one that, of course, Cam Ward, number 1 overall pick, only played till halftime. It was the Pop-Tarts Bowl, and it kind of makes me laugh because it was like there was one Pop-Tart that didn't actually pop up out of the toaster, that being, again, Cam Ward. But it wasn't Cam Ward who was the best player on the field in my opinion, in that game. It wasn't Rocco Beck, the quarterback for Iowa State. It wasn't there Jaden Higgins or Jalen Noel. It was Damian Martinez. I mean, just the Miami's very first touchdown was a beautiful cut back against the grain read by Damian Martinez. He scampers for like 70-plus yards for a touchdown. That to me, I mean, it looked like Terrell Davis. It looked like some of the backs that we have seen just be so successful in this system. And then I also am very intrigued by the fact that the Seattle has a back in Jacardio Wright from Missouri State, former Kansas State guy who is 6 foot, 217 pounds. He also has that quickness. He also has that vision. So again, Corbin, I just think that this is a very deep and talented running back class or running back depth chart for the Seahawks that
And it looks like Rob is frozen, so that's why I did not hear the end of his comment. My apologies to the 12s out there. But from my standpoint with the running back group, the way that this group is composed right now, Ken Walker III is still the highest ceiling player in this entire group. If he is able to stay healthy and he is able to improve upon some of those tendencies he's had to just abandon the scheme and just try to use his wheels to get outside. And it's worked for him sometimes, but that is a slippery slope to use in the NFL against NFL speed on defense. He's got to show he's patient. He's got to be able to hit those cutbacks and bounce the runs when they allow him to, depending on what the defense does on those zone schemes. He's got to be able to read what's in front of him and make those decisive cuts quickly. If he can, the athletic ability is there for him to do it. Where things get interesting, I think you have a three-way competition that is going to be underway when camp opens for who's going to get the reps behind Ken Walker III. It would be easy to say Zach Charbonnet is going to be the favorite, and I would say right now that he is because he played well at the end of the season last year. But Kenny McIntosh had a couple really good games late last season, and his game is predicated a lot on his vision. And, oh, by the way, those backs tend to do better in zone blocking schemes than they do in gap schemes. I think Kenny McIntosh has got a chance to come in and impress. And Damian Martinez, you mentioned the ability to be able to see those cutbacks, to be able to, I say as a running back coach, to be able to feel those cutbacks. He has the ability to do that as well as any running back not named Ashton Genty in this draft class. He just has that feel, that sixth sense for those cutbacks before they happen. He's able to read those things. I would say that he and DJ Giddens were probably the other two guys I had on my list that seemed like they were really good fits for a zone scheme. Giddens had a little bit more athletic juice, but these are two really good backs. Nonetheless, I wouldn't be surprised at all if Damian Martinez comes in and impresses the first couple weeks of training camp, and suddenly Zach Charbonnet and Kenny McIntosh are like, oh boy, he isn't in my rearview mirror anymore. He's right next to me, or he's past me on the highway. I would not be surprised at all that Damian Martinez ends up doing that. To me, that is one of the most exciting competitions that's going on there. And I would even throw Ken Walker III in there. I expect he's going to be the starter, but this is just an incredibly deep group that I could see shake out a number of different ways in this competition. And that's what makes it so much fun, especially with this new offense, bringing in coaches that have a track record of having teams that run the football effectively and well. I want to see how this quartet, and heck, let's throw George Halani's name in that group too. George Halani was great in the preseason last year. If George Halani comes in and plays well, hey, now you got a five-headed monster, and there's no such thing as having too many good backs at a position that has the highest attrition rate of any position in the NFL.
I would argue it's a six-headed monster. I think Jacardio Wright from Missouri State, who was formerly with DJ Gibbons, at Kansas State, also has that type of explosiveness and vision as a zone blocking or a zone runner. He's 6 foot, 217 pounds, and was very effective when he left Kansas State to jump to Missouri State. I think that he's got a similar size and skill set as Zach Charbonnet. I don't think he's quite as gifted, but still, to me, he is a really intriguing back. I thought it was fascinating, Corbin. The Seahawks decided to go with a couple of bigger backs late in the draft, whether it be obviously the draft pick of Damian Martinez or in going in free agency and going with another big back in Jacardio Wright. The fact that they didn't try to replicate Kenneth Walker III and his straight line speed, obviously, if you're able to run 4.3 and have the ability that he does, you're not going to beat an undrafted player. But still, everybody knew that this was a special running back class. And for Seattle to wait as they did and take advantage of the depth of this class, I think it just, in my mind, just kind of I would argue that it basically just says that the Seahawks know what they have in Kenneth Walker III. They know that he is their superstar and could be an absolute all-pro kind of a candidate. I also love the fact that they got bigger and tougher throughout the draft because, and then again, as you mentioned with George Holani, a terrific player. I didn't think when Seattle cut him, I was stunned. I didn't think there was any way in heck that he was going to be able to be retained on their practice squad. So to your point, sir, I do think that this is the deepest, most talented running back class that Seattle has. And I think that is one that is going to help them be very successful this entire 2025 season.
When we come back, we're going to shift over to the defense and an edge group that's had a few changes, but plenty of continuity as well. We're going to look at that group and discuss whether or not Seattle should be exploring more reinforcements to put off the edge going into the 2025 season. We'll get to that coming up next here on our Wednesday edition of Locked On Seahawks. Welcome back to the Wednesday edition of Locked On Seahawks. I'm your host, Corbin Smith. Glad to be joined, as always, by my co-host in crime, Rob Rang. And a special thanks to all the 12s who are tuning in. Thank you for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. We greatly appreciate it. And for your second listen, head on over to the Locked On NFL Scouting Podcast. The NFL Draft is long done, but the roster moves and news never stop. Hosts Kyle Krabs and Joe Marino will make you the most informed NFL fan this offseason. Find Locked On NFL Scouting on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcasts. Let's shift over to the defensive side of the football. We just talked about the running back group on offense heading into OTAs. As much depth as Seattle, I agree with you, as much as they have ever had depth-wise, talent-wise at that position. Going over to the defensive side at the edge group, there's been a few changes. Draymond Jones was a cap casualty, was cut, signed with the Tennessee Titans. They will get to play against him in Week 12 this year. Revenge game of sorts for Draymond Jones, but they cut him, and then they bring in DeMarcus Lawrence, the 33-year-old former Pro Bowler that's had a very good career. He's coming off a List fracture in his foot, though. And so you've got some of those question marks as well. And Uchenna Nwosu, we don't know when he's going to be back. He had off-season knee surgery as he continues to deal with this litany of injuries he's had the last couple of years. When you look at this group, Rob, you've got a nice blend of veterans and youngsters. I mean, Boye Mafe is just going into his fourth season. Derek Hall is third. Both these guys have made significant strides. Nwosu's been really good when he's been healthy. That just hasn't been very much the last couple of years. And Lawrence, he's had his share of injuries, but he's generally been a pretty durable player that can stuff the run, has pass rushing ability. And they like Tyreek Smith and Jamie Sheriff, as well as a couple of their undrafted players, headlined by Connor O'Toole coming out of Utah. I look at this group, and I think that the group they have currently, if everybody is able to stay healthy, I think that this can be an above average, if not great group, because they have a lot of different players that offer differing skills that complement one another. And Mike Macdonald's got a number of guys here that he can move around the line a little bit. There's a lot to work with here, and yet you've got a lot of question marks because you have a couple players in Boye Mafe and Derek Hall who have had really good emergent seasons in year two. Mafe wasn't quite as good last year. Is Hall going to be able to take another step forward? Or he's flatlining a little bit. They haven't had either one of those guys become a great player to this point. Nwosu's been banged up. He's missed 22 games the last 2 years. Lawrence is getting to be an older player. He's coming off an injury. So I look at this group, and while I think if everybody's healthy that it can be really rock solid, my essential question here is there a reason for them to look to continue adding to this group? Because I would argue that they absolutely, that position in corner, to me, those are two positions you can go get better with guys that are still available either in free agency or through trades.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that there is a possibility to boost this group. I also think that this is like kind of the boom or bust group. It just kind of depends on how optimistic you are from the injury perspective. And as you just pointed out, Uchenna Nwosu, Demarcus Lawrence obviously have struggled with durability the last couple of seasons. When they are healthy, they are difference makers, however. And I do think that they have not only the size, the physicality to be very successful in this system, they also just have the leadership abilities. That they are kind of the guys that in the locker room that when they talk, that everybody else is going to listen. I feel confident that DeMarcus Lawrence is going to be able to do that, even coming in as a free agent. He was the guy for Dallas. And again, he's another team that I was able to go to the Cowboys training camp the last couple of seasons. And I expected Micah Parsons to dominate. It was DeMarcus Lawrence who was doing that. It was DeMarcus Lawrence who made some of the biggest plays when Seattle played against the Cowboys in the last couple of years as well. So, again, I think that this is a massive addition to the Seahawks. Everybody is going to focus, of course, on Sam Darnold, and they're going to focus on Cooper Kupp. And I mean, no disrespect to either of those two, Pro Bowl caliber players, but DeMarcus Lawrence is a significant addition, assuming, again, that he's healthy. And so that, to me, is what, again, makes this one of the more fascinating positional groups here for the Seahawks this season. I am very excited about Boye Mafe. As we talked about, previously with the running back situation, I think that Boye Mafe is going to be right there with Kenneth Walker III as far as just kind of smelling the opportunity that is the final year of his rookie deal. And he has demonstrated the burst, the bend, everything that you're looking for to be a 10-plus sack kind of a guy. Derek Hall, to me, is not necessarily the most explosive speed guy, but I just love his physicality. I think that, he made strides this past season. I didn't believe that you called it. You thought that Derek Hall was going to be like, one of the better pass rushers for the Seahawks, and he definitely made huge strides, in his second season. It'll be interesting to see what he can do in his so-called junior year for the Seahawks. To me, Corbin, it's not so much about the injury question. I mean, obviously that's a big one, but a second question here is who's number 5? I think that the top 4, again, DeMarcus Lawrence, Uchenna Nwosu, Derek Hall, Boye Mafe. Clearly, they're the top 4 guys. But who's number 5? Last year with Mike Macdonald, 2 years ago with Pete Carroll, the Seahawks kept 5 outside edge rushers like these guys. So who's going to be the guy that makes it? Is it Tyreek Smith, who you invested a 5th-round pick in back in 2022, or is it going to be one of the 5 undrafted free agents that is still on this club? Whether it be a Jamie Sheriff, who, of course, was with Seattle a year ago as an undrafted free agent, Jared Ivey, Jalen Gaines, Seth Coleman, or, as you mentioned, Connor O'Toole, who the Seahawks gave the most money to their undrafted free agents this year. All of them have some traits. That, to me, is just going to make training camp, and as we talked about in the opening of the show, that opportunity against the Green Bay Packers and those joint practices that much more fascinating.
And if you have somebody like O'Toole or Ivy, I mean, Ivy's a guy that can play inside some at his size too. If one of those guys emerges in the offseason program into training camp is playing well, then you know what? You're playing with house money. If that guy can be number 5 and we feel like he can make an impact and contribute, cool. But I'm going to make the argument right now. I look at what's out there. I still think Jadeveon Clowney coming back to Seattle makes too much sense for both sides. You're not asking him to come in and be a starter at this point, but you're getting another player that has physicality, that can move a little bit around the line, is an elite run defender. And oh, by the way, I would make the argument the best season his entire career was 2 years ago, playing for Mike Macdonald in Baltimore. Those two know each other well. Macdonald loves his skill set, his length. I think they need another guy like that at the edge position right now. So Clowney would make a lot of sense. And here's the other argument I'm going to make. I wrote an article about this today on Emerald City Spectrum. The more digging that I've done into this, if the chasm between the Cincinnati Bengals and Trey Hendrickson continues to get wider right now, that bridge between them, it's been smoldering. I think now it is fully on fire at this point. That is a chasm that is going to be very difficult for that team to fix unless they show Hendrickson a bunch of money, which they have not been inclined to. Mike Macdonald knows what Trey Hendrickson is capable of. He was on the other sideline watching Hendrickson absolutely dominate Baltimore's offensive line. There was a 3-game stretch where he had 4 sacks against them while Macdonald was a defensive coordinator. Obviously, Macdonald wasn't the one that was calling plays on the other side, being a defensive guy. But you can't tell me that he has not looked at somebody like Trey Hendrickson and thought, man, I like my edge group, but that guy's averaged 14 sacks per year over the last 5 seasons. And I've seen some other people say, oh, he's 30 years old now. He's 30. he's not an old man. A lot of edge rushers, especially his style, they can play into their 33, 34, 35 age and play at a pretty high level. To me, I think you have absolutely got to be picking up the phone and just kind of prodding a little bit to the Bengals and say, hey, we can throw a second and a late round pick to you, and we might even have a young player in another position group that can come in and help you somewhere. And I'm trying to see if I can get him, because if you put Trey Hendrickson with Leonard Williams, Jaron Reed, Byron Murphy, Lawrence, and a healthy Uchenna Nwosu, Moffitt, I mean, you're talking a top 5 caliber defensive line in the entire NFL. And this guy has been as consistent as anybody. He's averaged 75 pressures a year the last 5 seasons, Rob. And to put some context to this, the Seahawks haven't had a guy with more than 69 pressures since Michael Bennett had 70 in 2017. It has been a long time. So I know there's going to be people say, but we got to pay him. You've got money. You've got $31 million in cap space. You got a ton of cap space next year. There is nothing wrong with going out and getting Trey Hendrickson. If he was a couple years older or he had a lengthy injury history, then I'd maybe be a little bit. I think they need to make a call, and I think you got to see if you can prod the Bengals a little bit and see if you can get him, because that has reached an impasse to a point that the door for a trade, to me, has got to be open now.
Yeah, and again, we talked about this on the last several shows, is that I think that is kind of the hidden genius of what the Seahawks were able to do here, is that they are in position to take advantage if there is going to be a team and a player who are going to have some type of a falling out. Trey Hendrickson's continued argument with the Cincinnati Bengals, I think, is kind of playing into Seattle's favor here. So I'm not predicting that it's going to be the move that they make, but I do believe that they have put themselves into position to not only have the conversations, John Schneider, and not only Mike Macdonald, but previously Pete Carroll used to always say, "Oh, we're going to be in on everything." You're not only going to be in on this, you are going to be one of the contenders. And so I do think that Trey Hendrickson, Jadeveon Clowney, hell, if you're going to swing for the fences, swing for the fences. What about TJ Watt? Kind of a thing. If the Pittsburgh Steelers are not going to be bringing in a veteran quarterback, then again, they're not going to be competing for a Super Bowl at this point. They're having a roster rebuild. So I think that John Schneider is going to be on the phone with everybody. And any type of established pass rusher who has the grit to play for Mike Macdonald, I think would be an obvious candidate to bring into the fold.
And I have one more name to throw in there that hasn't signed with anybody that can still play. Zadarius Smith is still available as well, and he might be a more affordable option like Jadeveon Clowney that you don't have to give up draft picks for. I just think that this is a group that it feels like another addition should be made. That is just my opinion. I think they need to get a 5th guy that can come in. And if it's somebody like Hendrickson, you're starting him because he is one of the best pass rushers in the entire NFL. But if you bring in somebody like Clowney or Smith, rotational piece that's played a lot of football, can do a lot of things. I just think that there's room for them to add. And they've got the cap space. I'm not saying spend all of it. You got to save some of it, but you have a cap that is flush right now. You have the opportunity to go out and make your team better right now. And I think this is one of the spots they should be looking to do that. As always, you can follow me at X and Blue Sky at Corbin Smith NFL. You can follow Rob at Rob Rang. Make sure to subscribe to Locked On Seahawks on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast to make sure you don't miss a single episode. Coming up on tomorrow's show, pre-OTA preview continuing. Going to look at receivers as well as inside linebackers. You won't want to miss it. Enjoy the rest of your Wednesday, and thanks for listening. Go Hawks.